Welcome to Bald Guy DIY. In this video, I'm going to show you how to add some flair and pizzazz to those boring old electrical switches and receptacles. As an electrician, I don't often think about the switches and receptacles installed in my home unless one of the screws isn't straight or the whole thing's sitting crooked. Most of the time, I think they look beautiful and they don't detract from the home decor at all. But some of you might think opposite. You might think that those switches and receptacles really are ugly and they seem out of place in something that you've worked so hard to decorate or make interesting in other ways. So in this video, I'm going to show you 3 different methods that you can use to take those boring old white covers and turn them into something a lot more interesting so that you can enjoy them in different parts of your home, for kids' rooms, or just to add a little fun and pizzazz. Let's get started. The first technique I'm going to use to decorate the plates is going to be hydro dipping. So in order to do that, I'm going to start by spraying each plate with a flat gray primer, which is going to cause the hydro dip paint to stick to it. Now, if you haven't seen hydro dipping before, I recommend checking out the video I did on reverse canvases where I showed a technique there to hydro dip both the picture frame and the vinyl. But in this case, I'm just going to start in my pan of water by spraying in different combinations of spray paint. Now, this spray paint is typical standard stuff you would find at a home improvement store, and typically for metal. I don't know if it really matters, although I have tried some craft paint in the times before and not been as successful with the aerosol craft paint. But here I'm just going to alternate between black and gray, which are the 2 colors I have most available right now, and just going to create a bit of a pattern. Now, you don't have to worry about it being perfect, but you can just swirl it around till you get what you think looks like a random pattern, and then you just simply take the switch plate and plunge it in, being careful not to touch too much of it because that'll prevent the paint from being there. Now, as I swirl it and move it away, you can see there that there's actually some bare patches where the gray primer wasn't covered by the paint. I wasn't very happy with that, and I decided to plunge it again a second time, which used the paint that was already there without spraying a bunch more. And this time, as I pull it out and let it dry a little bit, you can see here a much better pattern, got complete coverage, and no more bare primer spots. The next technique I'm going to do is search Google Images for some different patterns that I can turn into vinyl designs, which can be used to adhere to the switch plates. Now, here I found a tiger stripe first, and I'm going to copy that in and use the trace function of the Silhouette Studio. I use the Silhouette products with the Silhouette Cameo. It has a nice trace function so I can get the pattern and then simply set aside the original image. Next, I need to figure out how big the dimensions need to be, and I found by measuring the plates that a dimension of 3 1/4 inches wide by 4.75 inches high is perfect for getting a full coverage wrap around the switch plate. This, of course, is a standard single gang switch plate, so if you're using oversized plate or something like that, you might have to measure it a little bit different. Once I've stretched out the pattern to fill the shape of the design, once I've stretched out the pattern in order to fill the size of the rectangle, I'm simply going to select both items, the box and the pattern, and then I'm going to use the intersect function in order to cut out everything that's outside of that box. What I'm left with is a design that fits the cover plate very well. Next, I'm going to just make some copies, lay them out on the sheet, and then I'm going to set it up and send it to my vinyl cutter. Next, I'm going to try another design, this time with leopard spots, and when I found the design I want, I'm simply going to do the same thing, copy that design, and then paste it into the Silhouette Studio software in order to trace it and use the basic pattern in order to make a background for my switch plate. Once again, I'm just going to use the trace function. I prefer to bring the scale down, and that gives a little finer detail, and then just play with the filters in order to get the size that I want. Next, of course, I make the same size rectangle, 3 1/4 inches wide by 4 3/4 inches high, and then I'm going to stretch out the design. As I stretch it out, I realized it's easier to rotate it in this particular one, and so I just simply rotate it 90 degrees, fit it over what I want, and then I'm going to select both items and once again use the intersect command in order to cut away everything outside of the dimensions that I want. I'm going to group everything and combine the compound path, and then I'm just going to use the black color here to show you the design and see what it'll look like when it's cut out. Lastly, I'm going to find some of these little sticker designs which are used to give a cool little expression or face to your actual receptacles. Here I'm finding some mustaches and some hair and ball cap, and I'm just going to again use the trace function here within Silhouette Studio in order to isolate those parts of the picture and give myself something that I can cut out with the vinyl cutter. Now it's okay when you're tracing to go and include things that you won't want, because you can simply release the compound path and remove the items that you don't want in there. Later you can just group the compound path together with what you have remaining, and that'll be all you need for the design. Now you'll need to play around with the size of these finished mustaches and hair and things like that. I typically found if you stayed within an inch wide, you're going to be about right for the size of the full receptacle. But you know, with the hair, I found I could have actually made it a little bit bigger so that it fit a little more around the outlet. But you know, it really just going to take a little bit of trial and error until you get the sizes that you want. Next, I'm just going to lay them all out on the design, space them in a way that looks convenient and gives them a little bit of room to be removed later, and cut them with the vinyl cutter. Once all the vinyl's been cut, I'm simply going to weed out the design. This part can be the most therapeutic or the most frustrating depending on how well the vinyl releases from the backing. In this case it wasn't too bad. Maybe I should have cut the design into little smaller pieces so I didn't have to weed it all in one big sheet, but it turned out pretty well and released fairly well. When you're using hobby vinyl cutters like the Silhouette Cameo or Cricut Explorer or any of those things, you'll find that depending on the vinyl, sometimes it can be a little bit tricky to get those settings just perfect, but we've done it quite a few times and we've had pretty good success. Next, I'm going to do the leopard spot design, and of course the individual spots will also need to have the holes removed from them later, but you can see it is releasing again here pretty well. It's okay if some of those little pieces don't come through, because you're going to end up removing a lot of them as you actually attach it to your cover plate. Now, the release from all of the mustaches and hair and ball cap came really well, and I just had to remove those little pieces and make that all cleared up and good to go. Now that I have the weeding done, I'm going to apply some transfer paper, which is going to help me to apply the design to the cover and trim away the excess and then cut the individual pieces so that it's ready to install onto one of the plates. Next, I'm going to remove the backing from the screws and take the screws out of the cover plate because I don't want them to get in the way as I go to install the design. Simply going to make sure the design is stuck well to the transfer paper, and then I'm going to remove the backing and have it prepped. Now, you might try to apply the transfer tape to the design, but I found it was easier to leave it face up and then apply the plate itself. Now, if you roll up the edges, it's going to adhere to the sides of the plate, and then you can simply peel it back and it'll release cleanly from the plate and you'll be good to go. Now, as you come to the edges that are overlapping, you might have to hold it in place or fold it around as you go because it might be prone to want to pull away. Once you have it done, you simply need to wrap those around the edges. You can trim off the excess if you want, and then you're good to go. Of course, around the screw holes, you'll need to clear those areas out. It might be a little bit finicky, but if you work around it, it'll clean up pretty well. Just cut away any little bits extra that go outside of the boundaries and you should be fine. On the next design, I'm going to start with a piece of orange vinyl, and I'm simply going to again remove the backing and set the plate face down on top of it. Now, as I go around the edges, I'm going to cut the corners so that I can fold them over and they're going to overlap neatly and they won't be bulging or making kind of a weird corner. And when I cut off the excess, I get a nice clean corner and it looks great. The backing in place, you're going to find that there's going to be some air bubbles. So as you cut out things, you're going to find it's bulging in a few places. Putting a little hole in there and then squeezing out the air, it's going to flatten right out and it'll start to look really good. You want it to get it as neat as possible so it'll look great once it's in place. Of course, you're going to cut out the screw holes as well and make it ready to go for our next layer of vinyl, which is going to be the black tiger stripe. Once again, I'm going to remove the backing and then press the plate onto the design. And then as you can see here, as I roll up the edges and release, it sticks really well to that base vinyl and it causes the design to stay behind. The transfer tape releases very well and your stripes wrap right around the edges of the plate. As you can see here, there's a couple little edges that you have to bend over, but for the most part, it looks really nice and clean. Now I need to just cut out the space for the switch to go in, and if need be, cut out the holes a little bit as well. To apply these mustaches and hair pieces, it's really simple just to go around, pull them off as stickers from the backing, and just put them in place. No need to use transfer tape here. It's very simple just to apply them just like you would any other sticker. It does really look like a face as soon as you put them in place. As you can see, the hair could have been a little bit bigger and wider, but I think it looks great as a little hairpiece on this particular one. And as I put a ball cap on the other one, really gives them their own little personality. I tried a Decora style receptacle as well, and it looked just as great there. Everybody looks terrified. I might need to cut a few smiles and put those stickers in place to just cheer them up a little. Here's my leopard spot design in place. I think it adds a little pizzazz to the whole thing. And then the black tiger stripes on top of the orange backing just really looks lively there. I probably won't keep it at my front door, but it looks good. Finally, here's what it looks like for the hydro dipped plate. I think this one turned out really well, and if you use the same colors as your room is painted, it could really pop and make it look special. So there's a few ideas for you on how you can decorate your own switch and receptacle covers in order to make them more interesting, maybe make them blend in with a room or complement the paint or decor, or just to make it a little more fun and enjoyable for you and your guests. I do strongly recommend that you don't paint right on the switches or the receptacles, because that paint can get into the device and prevent it from working properly, maybe even cause it to overheat and fail prematurely, or even cause a fire if the materials that get inside there are flammable. Even in the fanciest homes I've ever seen, they don't make the switches and receptacles invisible. They're still there if you look for them. It's part of life. It's how we know we have the blessing of electricity in our homes, and we get to use it at the touch of a button or just simply plugging it in. So outside of that one recommendation, I'd say be as creative as you want and really bring something unique and special to your home and dress up those switches and receptacle plates to make it look a little more cool and interesting. I hope you take these ideas. There's a million other ways that you could dress up these plates. Try different things and see what works for you. Let me know in the comments which was your favorite and which one you'd be willing to try in your own home. Let me know what projects you'd like to see down the road. What's working for you? What do you like about the channel, and what would you like to see me do more of? You can always follow me on Twitter or send me an email. The details are in the description of the video. If you like the content we're making, please consider subscribing, leave us a like on the videos that you enjoy, and keep following back every week as we add new content. Until next time, in all your DIY projects, be creative, express yourself, and don't be afraid to be balder.